It is time for me today to eat a very large, excruciating, shapely slice of humble pie because I made a video about how England lost to Iceland 1-0. I thought it was hilarious. It was hilarious. It still is hilarious. I talked about why the English national team might be faltering, and I talked about what perhaps their future could be, which I said you could still win the Euros. But the United States decided to complicate matters by showing up in a friendly against Colombia and getting absolutely bent over a barrel. 5-1 was the final score to Colombia. A couple of late goals made it look worse than it was, but I mean, 5-1 is 5-1. The team got outplayed, defensive mistakes all over the place, looking scared, looking under pressure, and just generally looking like a bad national team. This, of course, comes one day after after a clip from an interview I did with U.S. goalkeeper Matt Turner, because we have if you guys don't know this, I'll fill you in. I do on behalf of a podcast called Player Manager, me being the manager because I play so much Football Manager, and Julian Gressel being the player who is a former U.S. international. He plays on Inter Miami. And we interviewed Matt Turner, the goalkeeper of the U.S. national team. And in that interview, just so happens that I decided to ask Matt Turner because, I was feeling excited. I went, I think the United States is the third most talented team going into Copa America. Am I right? That was the question that I asked. And Matt Turner has had all the media training in the world, I'm sure. But he kind of looked at me and he went, well, I'll validate that. I'll let you believe that. All right. That was the way that he handled that question. But there was a belief, a wry smile. You hear it from a lot of the U.S. national team guys with this idea that, hey, we can do something big. They don't want to guarantee anything, but hey, we're feeling like we're good enough. We can do something big. You're coming off a World Cup knockout stage run. Only CONCACAF team to do it, right? This has got to be an opportunity going into Copa America to test yourself against the best. Well, we weren't playing the best. We were playing Colombia. Now, Colombia is hot. All right, and they have full respect to Colombia, even though they missed the last World Cup because they couldn't stop drawing. They're unbeaten in like 23 consecutive matches. They've now won 7 straight, including the win over us. So they've started to turn those draws into wins, which is what they needed to do to make the World Cup a few years ago. So Colombia might be the third best team going into Copa America. I mean, Colombia, Uruguay, and Ecuador are the teams that are kind of contesting that dark horse spot with the United States. And Colombia certainly just beat the crap out of us. So... this is Greg Berhalter called it a wake-up call. Okay, Greg Berhalter called it a wake-up call, but honestly, I'm gonna call it a bit of a referendum because soccer is becoming way more popular in the United States. It's been moderately popular for a long time. That always gets disrespected. Disrespected's the wrong word. I'm not like offended that people think it's not popular at all, but I mean, we're not India, for crying out loud. Our national team's top 20 in the world. There is a contingent of U.S. society that has paid attention to soccer for a long time. That's where Pulisic, McKinney, and Adams, where these guys come from, is that contingent. But now it is becoming more broadly popular. Now it is way more accepted for the big sports media talk shows to be talking about it. There's a website called Barstool Sports. Let me see if I can pull this up here. And Barstool Sports is like the id. No, I don't know what the id, ego, and super ego actually stand for, but Barstool Sports is definitely like a part of the American conscience. It is a certain expression of American sports fandom. And it is now, in that kind of ultra-American, passionate about sports way, is now passionate about soccer as well, and tweeted after the match, Greg Berhalter has once again embarrassed our entire country. More proof it's time to fire him. And 11 Yanks, which is part of that original contingent of people that like that like soccer, that have followed soccer, it made a very important point that I think is going to change the way the U.S. national team is treated. This right here is why they quote tweeted the Barstool tweet. They said, this right here is why U.S. soccer is terrified of soccer becoming a mainstream sport here. Large media outlets that they can't bully and manipulate, voicing an opinion about their little shit show is the worst case scenario. They want soccer to be just big enough to fund their operation, but not big enough to have any real accountability. Now, this is a feeling for people that have followed soccer in the United States for a long time, that U.S. soccer is this little incestuous party at the top, and it's all the same people. And I mean, there's no better evidence than how the World Cup went down. If you have not heard about the whole Reyna saga, but the fact that Reyna's mom was on the phone constantly with the general manager of U.S. soccer during the World Cup because she believed that her son was not playing enough, right? And she was attempting to blackmail the U.S. Soccer Federation with allegations of abuse that she had against Greg Berhalter. Turned out those allegations were literally from college 35 years ago when he kicked his now wife in the shins one time. They then went to counseling for a long time. They've been married. They've been together. They took a year off and then have been together almost ever since that. And honestly, Greg Berhalter, as much as I don't like him as a coach, seems like an upstanding guy. The way he handled the whole situation, he sought out. I made a whole video about this. It's a really interesting topic because I think if you want an example of how to better yourself, how to overcome a mistake, Greg Berhalter got in an argument. His now wife pushed. I feel like I now need to explain it at least a little bit. So they got in an argument outside the bar. They were 19 years old. His now wife pushed him. He then kicked her in the shin and she fell over. He was so abhorred by his own actions, he went and told his head coach without any prompting what had happened. He went and sought counseling. He told her that he still really wanted to be with her, but understood if she didn't want to talk to him. And they took, I believe it was 9 months off. And then eventually, after he'd gone through the counseling and he'd done a certain amount of community service in the area as well, they eventually got back together, which obviously you wish he hadn't done it in the first place, but I commend the way that he handled it afterwards. And I believe that Berhalter, even though I think he's a terrible coach, is a good dude, right? But they were attempting to blackmail him to the general manager of U.S. Soccer during the World Cup because they thought Reyna wasn't playing enough. Reyna's parents, right? Which I get. I mean, it's your kid and your soccer momming it up or whatever, but that's insane that it's possible because, Messi's mom's not phoning, that's not happening, right? But it's because Reyna's dad played for the U.S. national team, because it's like the same 10 people. Greg Berhalter's brother was involved in the hiring process of Greg Berhalter, right? But the problem now is that soccer is becoming so popular, as 11 Yanks points out, you can't keep getting away with it. But there was a second hiring process after the last World Cup, because they actually pulled the trigger on the blackmail, right? And Greg Berhalter stepped away from his job, and the U.S. Soccer it went through an entire investigation to make sure that story lined up, and they also said they were going through job interviews. Now, I don't think Greg Berhalter should be disqualified from the job based off of the incident in college 30 years ago. I think he should have been disqualified from the job because he's just not great at it. There's a feeling that the United States, very much like England, wins every game by the skin of its teeth, right? The United States has accomplished a good amount under Greg Berhalter, but it is this razor-thin margin against teams like Jamaica that drive you crazy. And this feeling that once we get to the World Cup round of 16, we just get blown out by the Netherlands. This feeling that is bared out by the statistics. Even though we should be able to compete against these teams, outside of that draw against England at the World Cup, when we play the really good teams, when we play Brazil, Argentina, Germany, we don't have a chance. We don't even have a Croatia-sized chance. And our belief is that we should. Our belief is that we should have an opportunity. We should not get blown out every time. And we certainly shouldn't be getting blown out by Colombia. And it's the United States. We have the money. We have the infrastructure. We love sports. We live for this shit. We measure our nationalism based off it all the time. You're telling me we couldn't get a better coach than Greg Berhalter, whose greatest achievement was something with the Columbus Crew like 10 years ago, right? A guy that went to the Swedish league and got fired for not playing exciting enough football as a coach. I'm sure he's a great guy. I love his shoes. But now the United States is waking up and more people are paying attention to it. We've got random people on Twitter getting, 7,000 likes tweeting about the U.S. losing, but a step closer to Berhalter being fired. We've got PFT commentator tweeting "fire Greg" with enough G's to send you into a coma. The United States is paying attention. And I don't know if U.S. soccer loves that, because the fact that the United States is actually paying attention is going to make it a whole lot harder for the U.S. Federation to continue the same old, let's get to the World Cup round of 16 bullshit that the U.S. has been trying to do. Because the U.S. has now been at this level since 2002. And even though it feels like the players on our team have gotten a lot better, the hell do we have to show for it? We just showed up and lost to Colombia 5-1. And we played scared, and we played bad. We sucked. We were bad. Now, we could go into Copa America, and this was the wake-up call we needed, and our group is easy, right? It's Panama and Bolivia and Uruguay, right? We've got to be able to get out of that group. If we don't, please fire everyone, right? Because the United States has more money, has more infrastructure. We know it, right? Like in soccer, are we the overdog? No, but we're not. We shouldn't be the underdog that we are. I know overdog's not a word, but it felt right in the moment. But to Berhalter, I think he's fallen into the same trap that we see with Gareth Southgate, where you fall in love with a certain system, and that's the system you want to play, and it's control and draw the opponent out and wait for them to make a mistake. But on the flip side, why don't we actually just go play them? Why don't we actually just go try to overwhelm a team? Why don't we actually go out and go toe-to-toe with the team that we're playing against? Because everybody seems to think they're Pep Guardiola now, but they're not. Pep Guardiola's a genius, okay? And Gareth Southgate and Greg Berhalter are not. They're not geniuses. They're good guys and can be, at least in Southgate's situation, good coaches. But, I mean, this is international play. Pick the best players and put them out on the field and let them go do their thing. And then you make adjustments on the margins with the set pieces or whatever to make things great. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but when you've got an international team, there's only so much tactical work that you can do before you're just kind of overloading the players, and the players don't want to commit to such an overbearing system. And that's where Greg Berhalter's system's supposed to be unbelievably complicated. And the fact that he's implementing an unbelievably complicated system in the international game has never ceased to amaze me and drive me absolutely insane. The U.S. lost. I don't think the world is ending. I think the U.S. can still get to a semifinal at Copa America and is in that dark horse group to make a run. But me pretending that the U.S. is the third best team in Copa America is over. And Colombia looked good. We didn't. We looked like a bunch of scared schoolboys. And it's very clear based off the reaction of the media and everybody I know that we are now all paying attention. So if something doesn't happen, it isn't just going to be the little corner of soccer people that are mad. But if it goes horribly at this tournament, it will be all of the sports people that are mad. And that's the type of heat that the U.S. soccer really hasn't had to sustain before. We'll see how it plays out.